Gary Burghoff was a heart of MASH with his sweet smile, gentle voice, and that famous teddy bear always by his side. Viewers adored him, and many believed everyone on set felt the same way. But behind those cheerful scenes was a hidden story, one filled with tension and quiet resentment from someone who truly couldn't stand him. And this person was someone he was always with on set. Would you like to know the particular actor? Join us as we finally unveil the actor that truly despised Gary Burghoff, even when everyone liked him. Gary Burghoff's character versus behind-the-scenes reality. Sometimes we forget that the actors we see on screen are not the same as the characters they play. It's something that happens naturally when we see a familiar face in our living rooms every week. It's easy to think we know who they really are. We start to believe they're exactly like the roles they bring to life. But the truth can be very different, and when that truth finally comes out, it can be surprising, even a little heartbreaking. Take Radar O'Reilly, for example. He was one of the most loved characters in MASH Star. As a 4077 TH's company clerk, he brought something gentle and pure to a setting that was otherwise filled with sarcasm, weariness, and the dark shadows of war. While the other characters had rough edges shaped by trauma and exhaustion, Radar stood out for his sweetness and innocence. He felt like someone who needed to be protected from all the harshness around him. His big eyes and soft-spoken nature made him easy to love. He was the kind of character who brought a little light into the darkest moments of the show. And Gary Burghoff was the man behind that lovable character. He played Radar so well that many fans assumed he must be just as kind and gentle in real life. But when he left the series during the touching two-part episode titled Goodbye Radar, something shifted behind the scenes. MASH Asterisk continued without him, just like it had done when other main cast members had left before. And by the time the show reached its grand finale, Goodbye, Farewell, Amen, there was a wave of emotion from fans everywhere. People wanted to honor the show's legacy, celebrate the memories, and say one last goodbye. During this time, an article appeared in TV Guide, written by one of the show's writers, Burt Prelusky. The article seemed like a nostalgic farewell, but within it was something unexpected. Prelusky mentioned how people on set really felt about Gary Burghoff, and it wasn't what fans might have guessed. According to him, while everyone adored the character Radar, their feelings toward Burghoff himself weren't so warm. Prelusky explained that no one wanted to publicly speak on the record, but the general feeling was shared among the cast. They had a soft spot for Radar, but working with Burghoff was a different story. One actor who didn't want their name shared described Gary as someone who was difficult to get along with. They said he acted as if the world was against him, often being unpleasant toward others. But when someone stood up to him or gave him a taste of his own behavior, he wouldn't handle it well. The actor even recalled a funny but telling moment. Mike Farrell, another star on the show, once told Gary that he was good at being mean to people, but couldn't take it when others pushed back. And Gary, without realizing how ironic his words were, replied that he was tired of dishing it out. It was a moment that said a lot more than he probably intended. Everything became more complicated when one of the characters deliberately opened up about his off-screen relationship with Gary, and this was what nobody expected. Because we only saw their on-screen characters without knowing that there was something really traumatizing going on behind the scenes. Just keep watching to find out what really happened between these two. The actors who disliked Gary. During the early days of MASH Asterisk, the show seemed like a close-knit family on screen. It was easy to believe everyone got along like best friends. But behind the camera, things were not always as warm and lovely as people thought. One of the original cast members, McLean Stevenson, who played the easygoing and often overwhelmed Colonel Henry Blake, eventually walked away from the series. Most people thought he left simply because he was tired of always playing second to Alan Alda's character, the charming and quick-witted Hawkeye Pierce. But as it turns out, there might have been a deeper reason behind his sudden exit. McLean Stevenson once opened up about the people he worked with on the show. He shared that he got along with almost everybody. In fact, he said all the cast members were great, except one. The one person he had the most scenes with, the one he spent the most time with, was also the one he didn't always get along with, Gary Burghoff. Gary played Radar, the innocent, lovable clerk who was always by the colonel's side. On the show, they looked like the perfect duo, one giving orders and the other loyally carrying them out. But in real life, it wasn't always so smooth. Stevenson admitted that his relationship with Gary was a mix of both admiration and frustration. He said Gary was an amazing actor, maybe even the best among them, but they sometimes clashed. Sometimes they just couldn't see eye to eye, and small issues would turn into bigger ones. Stevenson also owned up to the fact that he wasn't always easy to work with either. As his character grew more popular, his confidence started to grow too, maybe a little too much. He believed that his own ego may have made things harder, and that he wasn't completely blameless in their disagreements. But McLean wasn't the only one who had a rocky connection with Gary. At some point, rumors went around the set that Gary could be hard to be around. Sometimes there were stories that pointed to more than just small arguments. In a biography written about Alan Alda in the early 80s, it was said that Gary and McLean once had a loud and heated fight. It didn't stop there. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John and was known for his calm and collected nature, once reportedly got so angry with Gary that he picked up a chair and threw at him. That paints a very different picture from what fans saw on television. Even though all these tense moments were happening behind closed doors, none of it seemed to spill over into their acting. Radar and Colonel Blake shared one of the most heartfelt friendships on the show. When Colonel Blake was written off the series at the end of the third season, with his character dying in a tragic plane crash, the sadness on Radar's face felt very real. That moment broke the hearts of millions watching, and it still remains one of the most emotional scenes in TV history. Still, the truth is that the atmosphere on set wasn't always friendly. And who knows? This might be one of the reasons Gary had to leave the set in Season 7. But what if it's not? We will still talk about this. For now, our focus remains on how Gary's presence in the show mostly caused conflicts and stress. Behind the laughter and the clever one-liners, MASH Asterisk had its share of real-life challenges. The actors were human, with their own flaws, emotions, and tempers. The bond fans saw between Colonel Blake and Radar may have been stronger on screen than off, but it was still a powerful reflection of two men trying to do their jobs the best way they could, despite what was happening when the cameras stopped rolling. Even though the show MASH Asterisk looked like pure magic on screen, with lots of laughter and heartwarming moments, there were signs that some of the tension behind the scenes quietly made their way into the show itself, especially in how other characters treated Radar, played by Gary Burghoff. If you watched closely, you'd notice that Radar was often treated like the annoying little brother no one could get rid of. The rest of the team would roll their eyes at him or poke fun. And while it was all meant to be funny, you can't help but wonder how that made Gary feel in real life. Gary might have felt overlooked. Here was a man who had a special connection to MASH Asterisk from the very beginning. He was the only cast member who starred in both the original 1970 film directed by Robert Altman and the television version that millions grew to love. That should have meant something. That should have earned him a special spot. But instead on the show, his character was often used as comic relief, the one everyone joked about, even though he played his part with so much sincerity and heart. As time went on, other actors started taking on more creative roles. Alan Alda, for instance, not only acted but also got involved in writing and directing episodes. Gary, too, wanted to bring more of himself to the show. He even wrote an episode that focused on Radar, hoping to shine a little more light on the character he had poured so much of himself into. But that episode never made it to the screen. It must have hurt, watching others take creative control while his ideas were quietly brushed aside. It might have made him feel like he wasn't as important as the rest of the team, like his voice didn't carry the same weight. And that's where some of the sadness begins to seep in. All the little moments of feeling left out, all the quiet tensions, and the misunderstandings behind closed doors may have built up over time. The reported disagreements between him and McLean Stevenson were just part of A. He wasn't a father yet. He wasn't married back then. Acting was his focus. His career came first. But as years went by, something far more precious took over his heart. His family. Everything changed when he became a dad. Suddenly, his children were his world, and all he wanted was to be there for them, to give them a normal, happy life. But being Radar made that dream difficult. Anytime he stepped outside with his kids, peace disappeared. Everywhere he went, people would stop and shout his character's name. Instead of enjoying quiet family time, he was surrounded by strangers calling out, wanting pictures, autographs, or just a moment with a man they'd watched on TV. And it wasn't just once in a while. It happened all the time. There was no escaping the fame. Even a simple walk in the park or a meal at a restaurant turned into a public moment. The eyes never left him. That kind of attention might sound fun at first, but to Gary it became exhausting. He couldn't fully enjoy the small joys of fatherhood because he was always being pulled back into the spotlight, whether he wanted it or not. His children didn't just have a dad. They had a dad who belonged to the world, and that hurt a lot. He once explained it simply and gently. He said that you need a real family life to feel whole. You need to be able to sit quietly with your loved ones, laugh freely, and make memories that belong only to you. But when you're famous, those moments are often stolen. He couldn't even be out in public with his little ones without being stopped. And no matter how kind the fans were, it chipped away at something deeply personal. His time, his freedom, his peace. Speaking of freedom, do you think that this was one of the reasons he left the set in the 7th season? You probably could be right if you said yes. But there was more to that, and this was something nobody had plans for from the onset. Leaving the set in the most terrible way. Most people could generally say that Gary left MASH Asterisk in the most terrible way for an actor that was mostly loved by the audience, but sadly disliked by his fellow actors. Gary Burghoff's character's farewell came in a touching 2-part episode back in 1979 called Goodbye Radar. Even though the show continued after his exit, many fans quietly agreed things just weren't quite the same without Radar. His gentle spirit, boyish charm, and deep sense of heart had left a mark that was hard to fill. Though the camp pressed on, a quiet emptiness seemed to linger in the space where Radar once stood. Why did Gary decide to step away from a role that had brought him so much success and love from viewers across the world? The answer, like many things in life, wasn't simple. One of the regular directors of the show, Charles S. Dubin, once shared that Gary had started to feel overlooked and underappreciated. According to him, Gary believed he wasn't getting the recognition he deserved for all the work he put into playing Radar, and that feeling slowly began to weigh on him. But it wasn't just work frustrations that pushed Gary toward the door. Behind the scenes, his personal life was also in a storm. Dubin revealed that Gary was going through serious difficulties in his marriage during the time of filming. Those personal battles quietly slipped into his performance, especially during one emotional scene in his final episode. As Gary's character spoke about the future he dreamed with a woman he had fallen for, something cracked within him. He broke down in tears right there on set. The filming had to be paused, and Dubin gently walked him around the quiet backlit of Fox Studios, letting him breathe and gather himself. That moment wasn't just acting. It was real, raw, and deeply human. It was as if Gary wasn't just saying goodbye to the show, but also trying to hold himself together while letting go of so much more. Interestingly, Gary himself never spoke in great detail about why he left MASH Star. He didn't seem to want to stir up drama or dwell on the pain. But years later, during a quiet radio chat in Ontario, he did share a bit of his heart. He explained that for him, family came before everything else. The long hours, the constant filming, the pressures of being on a hit television show, it was all pulling him away from being the father he wanted to be. He admitted that because of work, he just wasn't there for his kids in the way they needed. That truth hit him hard, and when it did, he knew he had to make a choice. So he chose his children. While fans miss his warm presence in the later seasons, it's impossible to fault Gary for the decision he made. Robert Altman's revelation about MAS**H. Now, apart from the issues surrounding Gary's character role, let's explore various controversies, scandals, and drama that serve as a threat to MASH Star. For a long time, filmmaker Robert Altman kept quiet about what he really felt about MASH Star. But when he finally decided to speak his mind, it wasn't just a whisper, it was like a thunderclap. During a DVD commentary for his movie MASH Asterisk, Altman stayed pretty calm for over an hour. The tone was quiet, relaxed, almost sleepy, in fact. But then something in the scene triggered him. As soon as Gary Burghoff showed up on screen as Radar, kneeling at a character's fake funeral, Altman suddenly broke his silence in a way no one expected. With years of pent-up emotion, he revealed that he deeply disliked the MASH Asterisk TV series. It wasn't about the acting or the popularity. It was something much deeper. For him, he felt the entire show betrayed the original message he had poured into his film. The movie, according to him, was a bold attempt to speak up about a real war that was happening at the time, one that involved the U.S. fighting in a faraway Asian country. It was serious. It had meaning and a purpose. But to Altman, the series that followed seemed to do the opposite. It turned what he saw as a powerful anti-war message into a weekly routine of comedy that ran for 12 straight years. He didn't buy into the idea that the show was delivering little moral lessons. He believed that no matter how thoughtful the scripts claimed to be, the bigger message was harmful. In his view, it painted people of color, specifically Asian people, as the enemy over and over again. And that, to him, was not only wrong, it was racist. He didn't hold back. He called out for what he believed it was, saying the show sent out the exact opposite message of his film. For him, the series didn't just miss the point. It completely reversed it. Altman was clearly frustrated that so many people didn't even remember his movie. He joked that if you asked most people about MASH asterisk, they'd probably say it's Alan Albert's show, not even getting the actor's name right. That, he felt, was proof that the show had overshadowed the original film in a way that erased its meaning. This wasn't just an offhand comment buried in the middle of a dull interview. It came during a DVD commentary, a place where directors usually just throw in lighthearted trivia. But Altman's words came from the heart. It was clear that these feelings had been with him for a long time. What made it even more intense was the fact that Altman himself had not had an easy time making the movie in the first place. According to documentaries included in the DVD set, even actors Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould once tried to have him fired from the project. They thought he was too eccentric, or maybe even a little crazy. But despite all that, Altman stuck to his vision. He fought to tell a story that mattered to him. Ironically, the very DVD that featured his raw commentary also included several old television specials and documentaries, most of which repeated the same stories again and again. After a while, it all started to feel like a loop. Interesting, yes, but nothing new. Still, Altman's unscripted outburst stood out like a lightning bolt in the summer sky. It reminded everyone listening that behind the scenes of even the most beloved classics, there can be deep disagreements and unspoken frustrations, rejected episodes and scripts. But then, it didn't end with this particular one. It extended to more, so stay tuned for the most controversial part. While the network sometimes asked for changes in MASH asterisk scripts, there was one particular episode that they simply wouldn't allow. It wasn't just about tweaking a few lines or adjusting the mood. It was a flat-out no. And when you understand the history behind the show, the reason becomes more interesting. MASH asterisk first began as a movie, a bold and darkly humorous film directed by Robert Altman. It told the story of Army doctors during the Korean War in a way that was raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically honest. The movie had swearing, violence, and serious adult topics, something TV couldn't fully handle in the early 1970s. So when it was turned into a television series, a lot had to change. Still, MASH asterisk didn't lose its voice. In fact, even with all the limitations of primetime TV, it pushed the envelope in ways no one expected. One unforgettable moment came when the beloved character Henry Blake was eliminated. At the time, television almost never did that, and major characters just didn't end like that. But MASH asterisk took that risk and left viewers stunned, proving that it was not afraid to deal with real emotions. And it didn't stop there. The show began removing the usual laugh track, especially during serious surgical scenes. Later on, they dropped it completely in certain episodes. This simple change helped MASH asterisk feel more human, more real. It opened the door to discussing topics that TV shows had long avoided, things like trauma, stress, and the emotional weight soldiers carried with them. While other comedies stuck to safe storylines, MASH asterisk dared to go deeper, shining light on the things people often ignored. But even with all of this creative freedom, there were still battles behind the scenes. The people running the show often clashed with CBS, the network that aired it. They disagreed over the tone, the themes, and how far the show could go. Despite those disagreements, most of the time, they found a way to move forward together. However, there was one episode that CBS refused to approve no matter what. It was called Hawkeye on the Double, and it was supposed to be part of the first season. The story centered around the character Hawkeye Pierce, played by Alan Alda. In the script, Hawkeye is secretly dating two nurses at the same time without either of them knowing about the other. But when the women find out they've both been played, they decide to get even. They team up and tell him that they're both pregnant with his child. The episode was meant to be funny with a lesson in the end, but CBS thought the subject matter was too risky for TV at the time. They worried that the idea of faking pregnancies mixed with themes of deception and intimacy would be too controversial for viewers. So the script never made it to air. But that wasn't the end of its story. Even though it never aired, fans eventually got the chance to see it. The unaired script was added years later as a bonus feature in the MASH, Martinis and Medicine Collection Asterisk DVD box set. For longtime fans and curious viewers, it was a chance to peek behind the curtain and see the episode that was too bold, even for a show known for taking chances. This moment in MASH Asterisk history reminds us just how far the show was willing to go to tell honest, emotional, and sometimes uncomfortable stories. Even when the network pushed back, the writers and creators of MASH Asterisk kept finding ways to challenge the limits of television. And in doing so, they didn't just create entertainment. They helped reshape what TV could be. In the book Watching MASH, Watching America Asterisk, Larry Gelbart, the man who helped create MASH Asterisk, reflected deeply on what the series meant to him. For him, it was never just about jokes and quirky characters. It was about showing the harsh truth behind war, revealing how pointless and painful it can be. Surprisingly, CBS never had a problem with the show's strong anti-war message. What they struggled with, however, was how different MASH Asterisk felt compared to other comedies. The show didn't always follow the usual formula. Sometimes it was somber, quiet, and raw. That unfamiliar tone made the network uneasy. The book also talked about another storyline that the writers had planned but never got to show. In that version, the doctors and nurses were stuck outside in the freezing cold, and they started secretly hoping to get sick enough to be sent back home. It wasn't made up. Real soldiers in tough situations have felt that way. But even though it reflected the truth, CBS asked them to remove the story. They thought it made the characters look unpatriotic, and the network didn't want to be seen as un-American. Gelbart later described this back and forth with CBS as a sort of game. It was frustrating at times, but it also became part of the creative process. Despite all these hurdles, he admitted that most of the time, the network gave them the space to create the show the way they